I love this service. You cheer for the announcements every week. God bless you, folks. Well, I want to welcome you to Broadway. We have some special guests that we want to welcome. How many have ever heard of World Vision? Raise your hand. World Vision, sure, we all have. World Vision is an incredible organization. We've partnered with them for years. In fact, did you know my younger brother was the chief general counsel for World Vision at one time? Yeah, he was the big lawyer there. So I saw it from the inside as well, that they're an organization of great integrity. And in fact, we have our Food for Families program here at Broadway that we run through our City Reach Care Society, where every week over 1,000 people are fed through our food bank with organic, excellent food. In fact, local hospitals send their mothers, new moms, to our food bank if they're in our area because they know the quality of food that is served there. We do that because it was started with a generous grant by World Vision years ago. They gave us the seed money to do that, and now we do it all on our own. But so we are very thankful. It was under their Partners to End Child Poverty program. So every one of those over 1,000 people who are fed every week are families with children 18 years of age and younger who are living at home. It was World Vision who first made that possible, our partnership with them, and they helped us get it started and run it efficiently. We are very thankful for them. They are an incredible organization. And I have standing beside me a good friend of mine, Robert McKinley, who is one of the directors, a regional director. He oversees British Columbia for World Vision. He's going to come tell us about an opportunity you're going to have. And I want you to think and pray about this as the sermon and day goes on. Before you leave this building today, you will have an opportunity to make an impact in a life of a child in Bangladesh. I personally want you to know that I think this is a great opportunity and something that you should consider, that we should consider as a congregation. So I want you to welcome Robert, who's going to introduce our speaker for us today. Robert McKinley, welcome him.
Thank you for those kind words, Darren. It's an honor for us to partner with you and the great kingdom work that's happening here out of Broadway Church. One of Broadway's kingdom partnerships is with World Vision, as Darren alluded to, in Barisal, Bangladesh. We call this a global partnership where a developing community has been partnered with a developed congregation, and that's Barisal with Broadway. Bangladesh is one of the most impoverished and exploited countries on the planet, but there's great hope. The church is on the move there, and there's even greater opportunity. And today, after the service, we'll have the chance to hear more about this and the opportunity to change the life of a child forever. Let's take a look at a quick video clip that we have here.
Hello, it's Ponchar. Assalamu alaikum. তুমি আমাদের লেখাপড়া সুযোগ দিয়েছো, তোমাকে অনেক ধন্যবাদ। তুমি আমাদের এখানে বেড়াতে এসো।
Many families live in dwellings that are not safe. When it rains, it leaks into the homes and children get sick. We don't have enough clean water. Over 800 people share just 5 wells. There are long lineups for water, and it's not meeting our needs anymore. Hygiene and sanitation is poor. Not all families have toilets, and sometimes 60 families share one community toilet. The sewage drainage system is open, and this exposes people to excrement and waste. People get sick with diarrhea, especially children. People in our community are poor. Our hope for change is that children will go to school instead of working. Although we have many challenges, we also have hope we can change.
Thank you, bye-bye. Thank you, bye-bye.
Our speaker today needs little introduction, as many of you are quite familiar with Mark and his writings. You may know him as a renowned author of many books, including this one called Your Church is Too Safe, a book that can profoundly impact your mission and place in the church while growing your heart closer to Christ. We'll be giving away a copy of this book as a thank you to those who respond to the call of coming alongside one of these kids today. Mark's also a professor. He's a local BC boy, but he's currently an Alberta defector. He's a contributing editor to magazines like Faith Today and Christianity Today. He's a visionary, a speaker, a good friend of many years, a former pastor of mine. But most importantly, and I can say this with the utmost conviction, he is a very faithful and humble servant of Christ. So please welcome Mark Buchanan.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here. I want to thank Darren for the opportunity and invitation, and Rob is one of my very dear friends, so I always welcome an opportunity to spend some time with him. And I'm a friend of World Visions. I pastored for 24 years, and I deeply believe in the work and the ministry of the local church. But one of the things that I deeply appreciate about World Vision is they also believe in the work and the mission of the local church. So you probably heard from Darren or from Rob the word partner or partnership many, many times. It truly is a partnership. And at the end of my time of speaking today, I'll talk a little more about the partnership that Broadway Church has in Bangladesh and how you can be personally involved in that. But thank you. I feel very honored to be here. This first time I've spoken at Broadway, but my history with you goes back to the early 80s when my lovely wife, who is with us, and hello, Sean, my beloved nephew, but my lovely wife and I had just become Christians, and we would take busloads from Coquitlam, where we're living, and come down here for monthly concerts. And so have appreciated the work and the ministry in the city and beyond of this church going back 30-some years. So thrilled to be here. As I said, I pastored for many, many years, and I currently am a professor in a seminary called Ambrose in Calgary, and I want to share the gospel. I need to hear the gospel every week. Actually, I need to preach it to myself about every day. The good news. The news of my freedom. The news of hope here now and hope everlasting. Do you need to hear that? I need gospel. And so I want to come and proclaim the gospel and talk about what is this gospel, that the beauty of it, the simplicity of it, the subversiveness of it. I want us to recover or stand back amazed again at what the gospel is. Last few months I've been fascinated by how people outside of faith see God or Christians or the gospel. I've been fascinated in both sort of as a sociological, anecdotal study of how people outside of my personal faith, how they see it or me. But I've actually been fascinated with the scriptures testify to about how people outside of faith see faith. Think of Pharaoh when he's talking with Moses, and he asks this question: who is God that I should obey him? That's a pretty good question. We ought to be asking, who is God that I should obey him? Because surely you've come to points in your life, intersections, where there's something before you, some temptation, some pull, and you think, well, who is God that I should obey him? Or I think of, one of the most powerful questions is asked by the man named Legion, full of demons. The story's told in Mark and in Luke. And he asks this question: what do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? It's not a bad practice to sort of every day wake and ask, what do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? But the question that I'm thinking about today, it's not a question, it's a statement that comes from some people who they don't want the gospel to come to their town. They don't want people who speak and preach and live the gospel coming to their town. They're a group of men in a town called Thessalonica up in Greece. And this is how they describe Christians, or particularly a couple of them, Paul and Silas, as they come into town in Thessalonica, ready to preach the gospel. Chapter 17 of Acts, verse 6, this is how they describe them. These are those who turned the world upside down. I think they nail it, don't you? These are those who turn the world up. When they don't, they're scared. They're scared out of their wits. They cannot believe that Paul and Silas have come to town packed with, armed with the gospel. And the whole town flips. They freak right out. And their accusation, it's an accusation, is don't let these guys near you. Don't let them come to your town. Hide your daughters, tie down. These are those who turn the world upside down. If what they're talking about gets hold of you, everything changes. And then they go on in the next verse, chapter 17 of Acts, verse 7, just at the last part, and they say why? Because they're proclaiming another king, one called Jesus. That has, of course, political implications, but it has these huge social, moral, spiritual implications. What basically the gospel is, the declaration, is that there is a different king and you can live under his rule and reign. You interested? But he changes everything. He flips the world upside down. What's particularly fascinating about this story that I'm referring to in Acts 17, Thessalonica, all the town flipping out about Paul and Silas, there's two things that particularly grip me about that story. One is the legend or the tradition around Paul, this man who, at that point, we only know he's with his buddy Silas or maybe a few other people tagging along, but we don't know for sure. But it's a small group of Christians who roll into town. It's not like the wild ones. It's not like this biker gang that comes in. It's just that this is Paul. And the legend or the tradition around Paul is that, okay, get this. This is how he's been physically described. Bald. Just telling you, short. Bandy-legged, sort of stick-legged. He kind of walked like this. And the tradition says he had a piping or squeaky voice. So, you're all the Thessalonians, okay? And what I need you to do is I'm going to be Paul. I'm going to step over there. I'm going to come walking toward you. And I need you all to go like this. Ah! Can you do that? Can you go, ah? Come on. Ah! Okay, so on cue, I'm going to be Paul. I'm going to say something out loud. And then you all go, ah! Okay, ready? Okay, I'm Paul. I'm going over here. I'm Paul coming to Thessalonica. Hey, you guys. Exactly. Like, what the deal? What's the deal? This little guy, this little bald, short, bandy-legged, squeaky voice guy scares people. The other thing that's fascinating about this is a reputation that would cause such startlement in the hearts of the Thessalonians. Not him, not the squeaky voice, ball short, bandy-legged guy. He's not coming to our town. This is the guy who turns everything upside down. Everything changes. Nothing remains the same when he gets hold of you. We can't have him come to Thessalonica. And what he's bringing, the gospel of Jesus, the announcement there's a new king. What's second thing fascinating is how do they know that? You see, if you track through the book of Acts and the journeys of Paul wending his way through various parts of the Mediterranean world, you realize this is the first time the gospel train has gone to that part of the world. First time. And they've only actually been in 2 towns. They stopped through, they stopped in a couple of others, got pizza, that sort of thing, but they didn't do ministry there. They've only actually been in 2 towns. So the only possibility that the Thessalonians, the rumor that they're working off of, oh no, these are those who turn the world upside down, squeaky, bald, short, bandy-legged little people are dangerous. They come to your town and everything flips. So what do they know? And the only possible explanation is they must know what happened in Philippi, because that was the last town they did ministry. Just down the road, they must know what happened in Philippi. The story's told in Acts 16. If you have a Bible, flip over to Acts 16. I'm going to talk through the story, read little bits and pieces of it. But I'm intrigued by the events of Philippi, because it established for Paul and Silas and whoever this reputation of the gospel bearers that completely rearrange the lives of people and the communities of people. And I would actually like for our churches to get back to that. I would like it if churches around Canada were known not as obnoxious and trouble, but those who actually flip things around, that they come to your town, and when there has been oppression and when there has been exploitation and when there's been racism and other isms that have kept us divided, that the church is going to flip it. Would you like that? I'd like that reputation for the church. Oh no, here they come. And that the hue and cry of those who are complicit in the oppression get scared, and those who are under the oppression get excited. I'd like that. So here's the story. What happened in Philippi that would gain Paul, little squeaky, did I say this, Walt? Anyhow, that guy. Does he look like anybody? Anyhow, where did he get the reputation? And it's Philippi, so what happened there? Well, here's the summary of the story. Paul is wanting to go somewhere else. And they're trying, it's not working. We don't know why. The Holy Spirit is opposing in some ways, trying to get Bithynia, Asia Minor. He can't get there. And in the night, he has a vision. And the vision is of a man in Macedonia. So Macedonia is a province that Philippi is a capital of. And the man in Macedonia is waving and screaming in the dream and saying, would you get over here? We need you. We need your help. And Paul sort of has this vision, and he says, I think we're to go there. We're supposed to go to Philippi and preach the gospel. That man in the dream, we don't know if it's a composite. He's just kind of a everyman representing all of Macedonia. If he's a composite of the Macedonian, character and physical appearance. We don't know who that guy is. I just want to hold on. Do we know who that guy is? We don't know. Well, maybe we do. We'll just come back to that. But here's the interesting thing about this man, the dream, up in Philippi, up in Macedonia, saying, we're desperate, we need you. We need your gospel. We need good news. What's so interesting is there was no community in all of the ancient world that was more at the pinnacle of success than Philippi. It was a Roman colony, but it was more Roman than the Romans. And Rome was at the apex of military power, education, law, medicine, anything, all the advancements and gains of civilization and culture up to that moment were epitomized in Rome. And Philippi was even more Roman than Rome. Had it all. And it wasn't enough. Do you know, you Vancouverites, you're so lucky. You know, I guess I shouldn't say that word lucky. But man, I walk around, I lived in this town for many, many years, and there's no town, there's no city in all the world like Vancouver when the sun is shining. It's jaw-dropping. And all the glittery stuff. I mean, they keep ripping down old things and putting up glittery things. You notice that? And that, you know, the incredible transit system that you have, and mostly clean, safe streets, et cetera, and Stanley Park. I mean, what is Stanley Park? I mean, yeah. I mean, I've been to, you know, some of the great parks in the world, but nothing beats Stanley Park. And the mountains and I mean, whew, it's awesome. You have it all. But without Jesus, I walked through your city this morning, and I looked in the faces. I actually greeted a couple of guys sleeping under awnings. And then I saw some people that looked like they had a lot of money. And I looked in their faces, and they don't look around and say, I've got it all. I think if their souls could speak, their souls would say, would you get over here? Would you bring what you got? Would you bring that gospel thing? Because I have it all and it's not enough. So Paul decides, I guess we got to go to Philippi. I guess we got to go preach the gospel. That's what he says. He concludes that they have to go there to preach the gospel. What is the gospel? Later in the story in Philippi, they meet this jailer, and we'll get to him in a moment. But the jailer asks this question, what must I do to be saved? And Paul announces, you know, what's involved. And it's the simplest explanation of the gospel in all of the Bible. Paul says to that Philippian jailer, believe in the Lord Jesus and you shall be saved. I mean, it does not get simpler than that. Little children can understand that. People with sort of mental disability can understand that. You know, that is so simple, even academics can understand that. Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you shall be saved. It's awesome. But then what happens between the concluding of Paul, or the sense of Paul, we got to go to Philippi and preach the gospel, and his defining the gospel is believe in the Lord Jesus and you shall be saved. What happens in Philippi is the gospel exploding, the gospel unleashed, the gospel turning the world on its head and upside down. And that's the gospel. Yeah, just trust in Jesus. Throw yourself fully on this other king and you will be saved. But just take caution for a moment if you've never done that, because it changes everything. Everything gets flipped. Your values, how you handle money, how you think of other people, what kind of neighbor you are, it all gets turned upside down. And that's what we see in Philippi. So let me run through the story quickly. Paul, they pack up. I think they have a Volkswagen van or something, and they pack it up and they go up to Philippi. And they get there. And one of the beautiful things about how vision works in Scripture is God just sort of says, go there, and then you go there and you kind of keep your eyes open. Ever notice that he doesn't really blueprint things for you? So they go there and they're just like, we know God's at work. This is not a bad way to live, you know. The weird dance thing would creep people out. But if you're just kind of like, where God's at work somewhere, how do we get in on it? And so Paul and Silas, they go up there and they say, let's go down to the river. We're going to pray. We're going to just try. And they go down, and there's this group of women having a little tea party or something down there. And there's one woman named Lydia. And she's identified as a dyer of purple cloth. Like, whoo-hee, she's got money is what we're hearing. She is loaded. And we find out she's from Thyatira, but she has a house here in Philippi. I mean, she's got cottages and condos, and I think she has a little jet that she flies between places. And she's loaded. She's got lots of money. And she's in this group of women. And Paul thinks, I'm going to just preach the gospel. He starts talking about the gospel. And this one, Lydia, she's the only one that sort of like her heart opens. This happens, you know. It's happened to at least one of you right now. You know who you are. You just feel it. You can feel something going on. That's happened to Lydia, and Paul sees it, and he says, do you want to know Jesus? And she gets converted. Here's the thing. This rich lady gets converted, and she has it all, and it wasn't enough. And the very first thing she does on her conversion, well, I'll read it to you because it's so skookum. Do you use that word? No, you're from BC. I thought, yeah, anyhow. Lydia gets converted, and she says this in verse 15. If you consider me a believer in the Lord, come and stay at my house. Do you see what's going on here? It's actually a sign of your world being flipped upside down. It's a sign of conversion. You go weird, crazy, generous. You know, she had lots of stuff. I could say all these houses and whatever. And she's saying, I didn't know what all this stuff was for. I just kept accumulating stuff. And then I kept, getting bored with the stuff, and I had to get new stuff, or I had to renovate the stuff. And I didn't understand what the stuff, I had to get unbelievable amounts of insurance to protect the stuff. And now I get it. If you consider me a believer, use my stuff. Honestly, this is one of the key signals of your life being flipped upside down, your life being converted, which is what it actually means, being flipped inside out. If you consider me a believer, here's my stuff. Do you know how temporary all your stuff is? You ever had a new car, and then 10 years later, you look at, it's so temporary. And so suddenly the lights go on for Lydia, and she's like, I get it. My stuff isn't for me just to hoard and accumulate and get more. It's actually to put into play for the kingdom of God. If you consider me a believer, here's my stuff. So next story, Paul and Silas go down to the river again, and this time they meet another female, but she's very different from Lydia, a very different social bracket. She's a slave girl with a demon in her. And this demonic, this foreign spirit that indwells her, empowers her to tell the future. And so her owners are they're getting rich. The girl isn't, they're getting rich. Heap big money off of her. They're pimping her. People come, they pay for her services. Should I move to this town? Should I marry that girl? Should I invest in that business? And she does whatever she does, and she gives them advice. And she must be good, because she's making lots of money. And this girl starts following Paul and Silas around, and she starts making a declaration. She says this, verse 17 of Acts 16. She followed Paul and the rest of us, shouting, "These men are servants of the Most High God who are telling you the way to be saved." Well, that's kind of cool. I mean, she's this local celebrity. She's well known for her spiritual insights. People pay for them. And she's following Paul and Silas around, giving them a brilliant infomercial. These are the guys. These are followers, servants of the Most High God. They're telling you the way to get saved. But it's breaking Paul's heart. The word sometimes gets translated, he became annoyed, but that actually doesn't capture the Greek. It's he became heart-stricken. It breaks his heart to see this little girl in the clutches of these malicious, exploitative owners and in the grip of this demonic spirit. It's crushing him. And so he turns and he casts the demon out. The girl gets free, but a riot breaks out because the economic prosperity that the owners have made off this girl has suddenly evaporated because she was only as good as this demon. And so they're mad and they start a big howling raging thing, and these guys are wrecking the economy. And the magistrate gets involved, and he has Paul and Silas beaten terribly, severely, it says. Like, we're talking opening, cuts in the body and stuff like that with the cords of the whip. Thrown in the jail and ordered to go into the inner stock or the inner cell, so that's down in the dungeon, and then shackles or manacles put on them. You can see the jailer, this kind of gruff, tough guy, just like, get out, pushing on, slapping these things on and clanking the door shut. You ever had a bad day? Things, you went out, you meant well, you intended something good, and you got misunderstood, or things didn't turn out so well. So here's these guys, they go into town, they do a good deed, they help this little girl that nobody else cares about. Everybody ignores, everybody exploits. Even the people that aren't owning her, they exploit her. They pay money. They don't think about the little girl. And Paul does, because the gospel has turned his world upside down, so he turns her world upside down. But for this good deed, they get this horrible punishment. I don't know, what do you do when you get kind of unfairly treated? You know what Paul and Silas do? Start singing. A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. Something like that. And it says the other prisoners were listening. Huh? You ever heard anything like that? Never heard anything like that. Well, aren't those guys, didn't they help that little girl in town? Yeah, they did. And they got beat up for it and thrown in prison for it? Yeah, they did. I never heard anything like that, guys singing after a day like that. Midnight, a big earthquake hits. We find out that the jailer, who probably was listening as well, has fallen asleep. The earthquake does two things. It wakes the jailer, but it also, all of the doors of the prison and all of the chains and the prisoners fall off. And so the jailer wakes to this, and he realizes, all my prisoners are gone. And he pulls out his sword, and he's about to run himself through. That's just what you do in Rome. And out of the darkness comes a voice, and it's the Apostle Paul. And if he has a squeaky voice, for some reason, I think it went deep. And this is what the Apostle Paul says to that jailer. Do not harm yourselves. We are all here. The gospel turns the world upside down, and I want to suggest to you that there is maybe no more powerful testimony to the subversive, transformative power of the gospel than those 4 words out of Paul's mouth: we are all here. Do you see what that means? You see that there's some prisoners in there. We know they're listening. And I'm going to guess that not all of them are in prison for having done good deeds in town that day. Some of them have done some pretty nasty, dastardly things. And I'm going to guess that some of those people in the prison have never let an opportunity to exploit somebody else's weakness to their own advantage ever pass them by in their lifetime, or since they're 12 or something. They've just exploited people, stolen from people, hurt people. We are all here. Why? And the only thing I can figure out is that not one of those prisoners was going to budge tonight, because something had come into the prison cell that was the first real taste of freedom they'd ever had. 2 men singing about their love for Jesus when they had every reason to gripe. The gospel turns the world upside down. Well, just imagine for a moment, Paul goes back to Philippi, we know 2 other times, a couple years later, and then a couple years after that, a few years. This story I told was the first time he went. I want you to imagine, and I forgot to say that the jailer comes running up at that point, falls on his knees and says, how do I get saved? And that's where Paul says, just believe this. And he's not asking, what's the doctrine of salvation? He doesn't know anything. He's just like, how do I get what you guys got? Like, how do I get in on that? And Paul says, you just believe, and he baptizes the guy, and this jailer who's been clamping manacles starts washing their wounds. It's a beautiful reversal because it turns the world upside down, the gospel. You go from bullying people to washing their wounds. But imagine Paul in his second or third trip to Philippi, and he comes to this church in Philippi. We knew that was a joyful church. We knew from the book of Philippians, right? It's a joyful church. And he comes into the midst of this, and I just imagine he walks in the door, and it's probably a little smaller than this church, but he walks in the door, and this guy with tats, like it's sleeves and right up the back of his neck. And he goes, Paul, dude! And he, embraces him, crushes him in a big hug, and Paul goes like, do we know each other? And he says, oh man, no, well, yeah, so I was in the prison that night. Listen to you sing. Turned my world on its head. Changed everything. I had to do another 2 years in that prison. I could have ran that night, but man, I was the freest guy. And then Paul comes in, he sits down to the front, and he sees this woman, and she used to be just dressed to the nines, but her clothes are looking a little, she hasn't updated in a while. He says, Lydia, how are you? Oh, I'm so full, so fulfilled. Sold a bunch of houses, gave it to the church. But Paul notices that even though she's happy to see him, that her eyes are all on this little girl up on the platform who's singing like a nightingale. And Paul follows her gaze up to the stage, and he looks and he says, is that her? Lydia says, that's her. That's her. I went to the owner. She was no use to them anymore, and I paid to get her freedom. And she's been like a daughter to me. That's her. And then the pastor comes up to preach, and you know who that is. That's the jailer. And I think it's the man in the dream. Get over here. We have it all, but we don't have Jesus. Come and turn our world upside down. And if they have a little slogan at the church, you know how churches have little slogans to kind of sum up? I'm going to suggest it's this. We are all here. And folks, I'm just going to take a couple more minutes, and I'm going to talk about the opportunity you have to actually turn the world upside down. First of all, some of you have never bowed the knee to this other king named Jesus, but your life ain't working. It doesn't matter what you seem to get, what status you get, what money you get, or what. Maybe life's tough and you just don't have very much at all, but it's just not working. And I think you're here by divine appointment, and the Lord has invited you to say, let me turn your world upside down. Would you put your faith in Jesus? Would you throw yourself on this new king? For those of us who have done that, I think it's good to hear a reminder that the gospel does this in our lives, and God does this through our lives and the lives of others. That we become really good news to people who need to hear it, and a little bit of bad news to people who need their life shaken up a bit. But as you heard from Pastor Darren and from Rob, there is an opportunity you have to continue. You began about 2 years ago a partnership in Barisal, Bangladesh, and you heard about some of the stuff there. They don't have it all. They have very little. They don't have clean drinking water. They don't have sanitary homes. They don't have proper education. They don't have good medicine. They don't have very much, but you could change that for them. There's a table out, and the little girls and boys. I have Ritu. She's 8 years old. Good health right now, so thank God. But you could ensure that. My wife and I have been sponsoring children since we first got married 30-some years ago. We hardly had money, but this was important to us. We have 4 children now. Some of them we've seen graduate, go to college, and we've picked up in their place another sponsorship. And we've had an opportunity to visit on site some of our kids. And I just want to tell you, as I wrap it up, about one visit we had to a World Vision project in Brazil about 3 years ago. And can you show Louisa's picture? So here's Louisa. She's spunky. You can tell how spunky she is. She's sassy, full of sass. She's got good attitude. And she lives in a horrid slum. It is squalid. And the only career option for girls like Louisa in that place was to be part of the brothels, which are right next to that, right on the highway next to that slum, and men in big trucks going inland in Brazil stop and they hire a prostitute for a little bit and then they move along. And that was really it. That was her career option. 2 years ago, prior to this photo, World Vision came in. And the beauty of World Vision, and I've seen this up close and on the ground, is it's not only changing the lives of individuals like Louisa, it's changing the whole community. And you can see the hope in her face, right? That wouldn't have been there 2 years before, because she would have known as she got up until the age she is now, she had one option, and that was the brothels. But you can see she's got other dreams, right? So I asked her, I said, Louisa, what do you want to do when you grow up? And she didn't tell me what she wanted to do, or what do you want to be when you grow up? She didn't tell me. She told me what she was going to be. She says, I am going to be the mayor of this city. $39 a month. And that's the kind of story, that's the kind of way that you, across way over on the other side of the world, can turn somebody's world upside down. I really would encourage you to go visit the table, even just explore what it's about, explore this project that you are already in partnership with. If you sign up today, give you a free copy of my book, Your Church is Too Safe. Do you know that some churches, and I would imagine your church will do this at some point, they actually take teams over to the community that they're partnering with, and they go visit them, and they get to see the children that they've actually sponsored, and they get to see the difference that $39 a month has made in those communities. And it's amazing. I've been part of these things. It's absolutely amazing to be part of that. And so you go sign up today. Maybe a couple years from now, you get to go to Barisal, Bangladesh, visit with your child, go see the community. And who knows, you might just be meeting the future mayor. Thanks so much.